Welcome to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes Ministries. Thank you for listening. Janet will be talking about her struggle with addiction, alcohol, drugs, eating disorders, unwanted same-sex attraction, and living a homosexual life. Janet has survived all those things by the grace of God. Janet's not a doctor, she's not a therapist, she's not a psychotherapist, she's not a licensed counselor. Janet is an ordained pastor and wants to show you God's promises, how God has set her free, and how you can be set free. What He has done for her, He will do it for you. If healing and freedom are what you want, you have come to the right place at the right time. Let's get started. Here is Janet Boynes.
Well, I always use these words. I'm so excited to be with Jessica Crayton. Jessica, welcome to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes.
Hello, good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Jessica, before I get into the ministry that you have, High Rise Life Facility, I want to talk a little bit about something that happened to you in your college days. And you mentioned to me when we first met that you went through an abuse. You're in an abusive relationship. Would you please
Yes.
my audience a little about that? Because the reason why I want to have you on is because I grew up in a family where my stepfather abused my mom. He was an alcoholic. I watched my mother get knocked down like 18 steps and not move. And we think she was dead. Or, my stepfather was an alcoholic. He would come back on the weekends. And next thing we wake up and there's my mom with all these bruises. And as kids, there was nothing we could do. But your abuse started in college. Can you share with my audience a little bit about that?
Yes. So back in high school, I guess my biggest dream was to play college soccer. I had played soccer forever, and so I actually got a full ride to a Division I college. And when I got there, I was actually dating someone prior to going. This was Lamar University in Beaumont. And when I got there, I was 13 hours away from, the person that I was dating. And, we just slowly kind of grew apart. And I dated another guy there. And it was very controlling from the very beginning. It was, take all these pictures down, change all your social medias, put me on this, put me on that. You can't wear this, you can't wear that. And so for me, I guess the trauma backs up a little bit to my childhood and not really having my father when I was a kid. I, just grew up thinking, there was something wrong with me or I didn't feel like I was wanted. And so I felt like because I didn't feel worthy or I didn't have a good example of what a healthy relationship looked like, the attention that I got from this guy in college, I thought that's what it was about. Like if you weren't screaming at me, if you weren't putting your hands on me, like you truly didn't love me. And so that relationship was by far the worst experience probably of my life. I fist fought every day, a grown man, 6'4", 185 pounds, strangled, almost thrown off of a second floor. He would burn all of my things. There was one point, because of course, like I started to fight back, and there was one point to, I tell everybody I felt like it was just the Holy Spirit, because as he was choking me and I felt like, I'm sure there's somebody out here that can relate, but right before like you black out, you just kind of have like all these thoughts go through your head. Like, is this it? Like, is this where he's going to kill me? Is my roommate going to come in and find me dead on this bed? And I felt like the Holy Spirit, like I had my legs under him and I pushed him off, and my bed was kind of risen off of the ground pretty high. And so he like fell and hit his head and he was knocked out on the ground.
Jessica,
And
I want to take a step back because your story is so compelling. As I started out, I watched my mother get abused, so I understand it. When I was in a lesbian relationship with a woman that was an alcoholic, I would literally let her hit me and beat me up when she was drunk because I looked at it as one, I was getting attention. Two, she don't know what she's doing. She's drunk. The next
right,
thing she's going to regret it. So I continued to allow that to happen, and I really never talked about it until today because you're the first person
mhm.
I really had on that has been abused. Jessica, when you were going through the abuse and in the beginning of the relationship, when he was saying, take down your posters, you can't wear this, you can't wear that, did any of your friends come to you and say, Jessica, I think you need to be out of this relationship? He's abusive. He's telling you what to do, what not to do. He's trying to control you.
No,
So none
there
of
was
your friends intervened. Even
no.
though, what about, and we'll get to that. What about after the fact when you broke up with him? Did they ever say, well, we saw him abusing you and we're afraid to say something?
To this day, there was one girl, her name is Courtney Stocks, and she lives in Canada. And we obviously were connected through soccer. To this day, I think she's probably the only person that ever said, I'm so glad that you're not with him anymore. And I'm so glad that you got away from that. Um, I think that's another part of the reason why I just felt like, is this what's supposed to happen? Like, am I supposed to just take this? Is this, like I mentioned, I was dating a guy prior to going to this school. And so what was really like messed up about it is that like I've never, cheated on a boyfriend and I've really like held that near and dear to my heart, but like this guy was so like, if we're hanging out, like we're together and you need to break up with him right now. And so what really hurts I mean, to this day, I'm healed. But like when I tell this story, I literally broke up with him. And the very next day, like on my social media, I was in a relationship with this other guy. And so it was for me healing I hurt somebody deeply. And then so I was thinking, is this just, is this my turn to get hurt because I hurt somebody? Is all this just kind of my payback? Like it was, that day that I did that and I had so many cops in my room and I just felt like they knew what was going on. They knew that and they just kept asking me, are you sure this is what happened? And I told them, we were just wrestling and he fell.
Hmm.
And they knew, I just felt like they knew. But even then, with 8 cops in my dorm room, I still didn't have the courage to say anything. And I
Why,
even,
why do you think that is? Because you mentioned, as we go back before we talk about the police officers, that the friends that were in your life, I believe they knew that you were being abused, but people are afraid to say something. And those of you that are listening to Jessica's story, if you have a friend or a relative or family member that's being abused, you have to speak up. You have to intervene on their behalf because sometimes you just don't know. Um, how to help them. But if you go to them when they're alone and say, hey, are you abused? Can we help you? We might be able to get them some help. Or you might be able to reach out to somebody and say, hey,
right,
we need to get this person out of the house or get them into some type of
right,
center that is able to, be a liaison between the two. But
right,
I know my mother didn't get out of that relationship. I didn't get out of that relationship because I think you said earlier you didn't have a role model as a father of how a man should treat you. And so sometimes we have a tendency of staying
right.
something because when you know better, you do better. When the police officers came
Right.
and they knew that there's things going on, and not all police officers, and I think they have to get better at saying, you know what, you're an abuser, we're going to put you away if we have to put you away for life. This is
Right.
so often. What do you wish the police officers would have said or would have done at that time?
I wish that they would have just acted on it. And I guess it's hard. And when I say acted on it, just even offered me a hug. I mean, my neck was bleeding. I mean, I 30 minutes prior almost died of strangulation. And I just wish in that moment somebody offered a hug or somebody said, "Hey, I really know I can sense what's going on here and I want to help you. And I know you're scared and I know you can't say anything right now." I just I would have loved to have just been even a hug, a simple hug to let me know that I was going to be okay. It felt like I had to just continue on with this story of this is what happened. We were wrestling and I knocked him off the bed and he fell. I rode the ambulance to he went to the hospital because I don't know if you know to this day I don't know if this was an act of his or what it was because there was a lot of manipulation that went on. But he didn't come, he didn't like fully wake up, so I ended up calling 911. And then I feel like if I don't ride the ambulance, like everybody's going to know what's going on. So then I ride the ambulance and I go to the hospital. And it's just, there was one nurse at the hospital and she was like, "I noticed that you're limping, are you okay?" And I just said, "Yeah, I play soccer and I got hurt in a game." And I just made so many excuses for his behavior and for maybe this is what I deserved. This is my treatment. And I just, I didn't know what to do then. I didn't know how to handle it. And people that didn't know, I was afraid to tell them. I was, just embarrassed and just stuck. When you're in it, you're in it.
Mhm.
And just like you said, if somebody knows, like if you know something is going on, I mean, you can honestly save somebody's life because some people don't make it out of these. And I feel like, there was so many times, I mean, for a solid year, I was bruised and battered and cut and burned and just so many different things that I look back and I'm like, wow, like God was the only reason that I made it out of all of that because it was a really crazy time. It really was.
It's horrifying to me to know that you went through that because I can still visualize and I can see um just in my mind my mother going through that as a child. And if I really think about it, I can still
Mhm.
see the room where she was getting beat up in. And we just don't have that strength to fight back. And then what I notice, if women really try to hold their own, or if the guy gets shot or whatever like that, we are held responsible for it because we didn't pick up the phone and call 911.
Right.
And
Hmm.
what gets me is that in spite of everything, you still went to the hospital with him. We still tried to protect the abuser in every sense of the way, whether it's physical abuse or, sexual abuse. We still protect our abuser. Do
Hmm.
you think women think that if I don't protect them, then they're going to come after me in the long run and still try to hurt me?
I think so. I think that's part of the reason for sure. You're being abused and you're being hurt physically, emotionally, mentally, daily. Um, but for me in specific, through that all, I still felt like I loved this guy and I wanted to be like he was going through something and I wanted to be there for him. And so when I look
Think
back on
you
it,
could change him? Because a lot of people think that you could
back
change
then, yeah,
somebody.
back then I did. I did think that back, through through my love for him, and no matter what he did to me, I felt like that he would change one day,
Mhm.
and that's so far from the truth, Um,
Exactly. Unless they go and get the professional help that they
right,
need, or they
right.
recognize that they need help,
Mhm.
they're not going to change. What
No,
changed in you to say, you know what, enough is enough? I am not going through this anymore. I'm getting out of this relationship. What what broke the camel's back for you?
So he got kicked out of the school that we were both attending, and that was a blessing from God because um there was nothing that was going to keep me from him at that moment, in those times. He went to a school that was 9 hours away from me, but I still traveled every weekend to go see him. I made a round trip um, to Alabama every other weekend, and I would say the very last thing that I really remember is that I was now getting in fights with other women because he was their boyfriend, and who was I? And so I remember going, and there was like 7 different women that were just telling me, just all these things, how he was, sleeping with this person and this person. And so I just felt like through the abuse, through not come we weren't together even in the same city, and then all of the cheating was my last thing. And when I look at it now, it was really God just separating me. He wasn't no longer there at the school, and then I really went downhill from there. When I finally was like, this is it. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't keep doing this. And I think for some women who are in abusive relationships, it's really hard to get out when the man won't leave you alone. And just the abuse is continuing, day in, day out. And in this situation, it was almost like I was free. He had left me alone. He was no longer here. And I didn't need to keep chasing him. I was being, assaulted and cheated on. And I took a year after that and really, really just figured out who I was, and, just spent time with the Lord and just healed. But it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty at first.
Healing isn't always pretty, Jessica. Those of you that are listening, please share this podcast with someone that you might know who is going through physical or sexual abuse, because I think hearing somebody else's story and the impact that it has on someone can help someone else. Jessica, you talked a few times that I did not want to ignore. I wanted everybody to hear your story. You said God intervened. Were you a Christian at that time? Were you going to church? Was he a Christian? Were you in a relationship where you were dating someone that was unsaved?
So I have always been a Christian, but I didn't necessarily grow up in the church. I didn't practice what all being a Christian entails. And I didn't have lots of examples of what that looked like. And so the guy that I mentioned that I was dating prior to this abusive relationship, his family, who I'm still really close to, his sisters, um, his family was really big into going to church and really just practicing what it is to be a Christian. And so through dating him, I really found myself in Christ. And so I, was going to church every Sunday. And so when I guess, spent time with the Lord, it was kind of just reverting back to all the things that I had recently learned in that past relationship, the person that I hurt by, doing what I did. And then, just his family was the one who just really, just taught me a lot about what it is to be a Christian and to dive into the word and to, show up to church and, just to do those types of things. And so that's what I did. I just, went back to what I knew what would work for me. And but like I said, it still wasn't pretty, because when you think you're unworthy of something, you don't go straight to the word. I would go to alcohol, I would go to partying, I would do the wrong things to take my mind off of all of my feelings inside of, being unhappy and not liking who I am. And, I'm never going to find happiness. And is this it for me? Is this, I'm just going to be another story that, we tell with no success or no happy ending. And so for years I did that. I partied and I drank and I leaned on all of the worldly things.
So you
And so,
other things to medicate your pain, as many of us do when we're
yeah.
hurt. If we're not in a unequally yoked relationship, we look for
Hmm.
drink, alcohol. Like for me, coming out of homosexuality or dealing with abuse, even today, I'm still seeing a counselor, and I'm 65 years old, and I'll probably see a counselor till the day I die, because it's nice being able to talk with someone outside of my core friendships. And I think
Right.
probably one of my best friends is, Becky
Hmm.
Hennessy,
Hmm.
had lunch with yesterday, me, her, and Stacy. We're really good friends, and we need people like that in our lives. However, we don't want to dump everything on our friends.
Right.
So
Right.
sometimes you got to go outside of those friends to really get to the root cause of, number one, why did you stay in an abusive relationship? What
Mhm.
did you deal with as a child? But something I noticed as you're continuing talking before we talk about high rise life facility, you keep saying the person you hurt, the person you hurt, the person, you're still saying that. Why are you
Mhm.
still blaming yourself?
Um,
I don't know if you
it's
picked up on that.
yeah, I just think that it's a part of what happened, and I just feel like um it's part of the story, like I was in this abusive relationship, but
Where
the
was it fault? Because I notice a lot of women, and even today, as a credentialed pastor under the Assemblies of God, um, when I talk with women that are in relationship, or even men that were abused by women, they still blame themselves as if
Mhm.
they were the
Mhm.
problem.
Right.
And it
No,
wasn't your fault. Like my mother, it
right,
wasn't her fault. Well, I did this and that's why he hit me. Or, the
right.
girl that was traveling with her boyfriend, they went on vacation, and, the
Hmm.
cops stopped them on the street. I don't know if you remember that. I forget her name. And he wound up killing her. And the cops stopped on the street and asked her the questions. And somebody said, I saw a guy yelling at a girl. And she said, no, it was my fault or whatever. It's like,
Right,
when will you stop blaming
right,
yourself?
right. No, I definitely, like for the abuse and stuff, I don't blame myself. I know now, that definitely wasn't my fault, and all the things that I did. I was just lost. I was very lost and unsure of myself. So I definitely know that, that wasn't my fault. Um, I guess me saying that, the person that I feel like I hurt was so the guy I was in a relationship with before my abusive relationship. I just feel like that's just a part of kind of that story for me. But yeah, as the abuse, absolutely. I blamed myself for a lot of years. Like it must have been me. Something was wrong with me. Maybe I'm just, not good enough to attract a man who's, not going to put his hands on me. And so now, I don't know if I kind of vaguely share this at Trinity, but I'm married and I have 5 children. We have 2 sets of twins. Um, and so he's never, ever, ever put a hand on me. And he's never, really raised his voice at me. And he's patient and he's caring. And he's, just all of the things that I never thought I deserved.
Isn't that something that you just said you don't think you deserve this? And we'll get into your family and your ministry in a few minutes. But it's something that we as women, and I talk with many women all over the country, we always feel like we're not deserving or we're not,
Right.
or, in relationships, if something happened with a woman, a guy is always called by his name and we are called different names,
Right.
and
Right.
pretty sad how things work in the world. But I am so glad you're free. I'm so glad that
Yes.
on a different trajectory, that one, this is going to help other women. And those of you that are listening to Healing
Yes.
with Janet Boynes, you're listening to Jessica Crayton, who was in an abusive relationship, and by the grace of God, she is no longer in that relationship. And please share this podcast, because there's many women or men that could be following you on social media that might just hear this podcast and realize
Right.
that God can do it for Jessica. He can do it for me. Jessica, with that being said, how does high rise life facilities come in play your ministry, what you do now, with what happened to you in your past? Is there any correlation?
100%. Um, so I think I've always just been some sort of caretaker. I've always felt that in my heart as maybe my calling. But the abuse and the just not, I guess, feeling like my mom, obviously, she's s- single mom, but like I felt like I was always, just kind of left out in regards of, my father not being there when I was a child. That definitely correlates because the need to take care of people um, is is huge for me. Like it makes me extremely happy, joyful to care for someone. I would rather give you something than to receive something, that's how that correlates because I think I what I'm doing, even though like I serve adults with special needs, I it's like serving almost my inner child. Like it's what I wanted um, for myself when I like just somebody to take care of me in my abusive relationship. I just wanted somebody to care for me, to save me, to provide an opportunity for me. And so in providing opportunities for my adults with special needs, just it makes me full, it makes my heart full of just really gratitude and I'm happy, happy, happy to serve. So
I think your servant attitude, as mine, I worked in special ed, for about 5 years, a paraprofessional in the school district. Even though I watched abuse, I've been raped by my mother's husband. There's something about giving back and giving. I continuously give constantly. People are like, "You're always giving to other people." I get fulfilled when I give.
it's
Because
awesome.
thing in me that, like my next door neighbor who I love dearly, and they're not Christians, but I continue. They just had a baby. I went out and bought all these baby clothes because I enjoy doing it. The baby's
Mhm.
3 months, and I don't think they had to buy any clothes because I bought them all. Love on them. There's a neighbor across the street that I
Yeah.
really know. The wife is 8 months pregnant. I went and bought them gifts. And there's
Wow.
something about giving back to the community, and you're working with um, men and women or kids that have a special need. And
Right.
I think the gift that you and I have of giving, of ourselves and giving towards those that um, might need different things than we need. I think that's a gift from God. You have compassion, you love them. You're a very caring person. I knew that when I first met you. I thought
Thank
she
you.
has so much to give and you have so much love, and I'm so excited about what God has done in your life, and he continues to heal you from the inside out. Share with my audience just some of the things real quickly that you do at High Rise Life Facility. We know that you went back and got your degree, or you have your degree, correct? What is your degree?
Yeah. I have a master's in special education.
Mhm.
And so yes, we serve adults with autism, Down syndrome, traumatic brain injuries, and many more. And we offer functional academics, life skills, cooking skills, social skills. We do lots of, so our community outings is just working on appropriate behavior in the community. So, like for you and I, we can go to a restaurant and we know we can't just go and scream and be loud because it's not appropriate in a restaurant. So, we take our adults with autism and such to these community outings and put them in these settings. And we work on these appropriate behaviors. And so, recently we took 25 adults to Chili's, and everybody did great. And so, they just, it's important that they know how to use those skills in the community, because a lot of people are still very unfamiliar with, say, an adult with autism. And I guess the biggest word here at High Rise is inclusion. And we just strive for them to be included. And even when somebody doesn't understand, if we are able to teach them these appropriate behaviors, it just helps with them being included. And we do Special Olympics. We just competed in a Special Olympics basketball skills event. And so this is their life after high school. Their parents are lifelong caretakers. And so where I, went to college, or I moved out of my parents' house, I got married and did this, did that. Most of these adults won't ever do that. And so I guess this ministry also is really huge for our families, because they have somewhere to bring their adult child. Even if it's to run to the grocery store, parents need a break as well. And they need time for themselves. And when you have an adult child with special needs, that doesn't just come like, you don't have an empty nest. Mm-hmm. It's forever. And so
because one of my board members, Charlie, has 3 kids that have special needs, and mm-hmm. he and his wife will never be empty nesters. Those children will be with him, even though they're getting close to adults. They mm-hmm. will always be there. They cannot be on their own. They just mm-hmm. don't have the ability to do that. And so to have you in your ministry, High Rise Life Facilities, take special need children and teach them some of the skills that they need, mm-hmm. like going out and maybe possibly getting a little job. I know at Lifetime Fitness in Minneapolis, Minnesota, they have mm-hmm. special need children clean the equipment. They get paid for it. They'll come in and they'll clean, and they're so happy. They're autistic and they're smiling and they're bright, and they're learning how to be included in some of the things that we're doing. It's a horrible thing, those of you that are listening, to feel like you're not included. And we as Christians don't do a very good job at including, people into our little circle. And we have to be better at that. Jessica, 2 questions before we end this podcast, which I believe we can go on for a very long time. If someone wanted to reach out to you, I don't know, how you receive autistic children or children with special needs. If someone wanted to reach out to you after listening to this podcast to get more information from you, can you tell my audience how they can do that?
Yes. So my cell phone number is 469-236-6917. And we have our email address. It's highrisedayhab. It's HIGHRISEDAYHAB
But can you go to your website? Do you have a website?
Or we sure do. It's highrisedayhab.org.
That is really exciting. Those of you that are listening, you have a child that has a special need, please reach out to Jessica, because parents we know, or siblings, or somebody that has a special need, family member living with them, it can be difficult. And sometimes you need time away. And God has given Jessica the gift of working with autistic or special need children. Jessica, also, what would you like to say? I want to give you the final word to men or women that have been in abusive relationship or maybe still in a relationship. Speak to them.
The first thing I want you to know is that there is definitely always a way out. Um, it's going to look different for everybody. And I know when you're going through it, you may be at a point to where you're hearing this and you're like, there's no way, like I can't. But nothing is too big for God. And I just want you guys to know that you are worthy of all of the good things that God has for us. And what you're going through right now will just be a testimony. One day you'll share like I am and how I made it out. And one day you'll tell people how you made it out and how God pulled you through the mud. And you'll be an inspiration to somebody. And I just want you to know that you can make it. I promise you can. And even when it doesn't feel like it, you can. And I'm praying in specific for anybody being currently abused. And I just, it's heavy on my heart. I feel like, I just feel even talking, it's heavy because so many people go through it. And we can sit next to somebody in church even and, not know what they go home to, or not, brush shoulders with somebody in a grocery store. And it's just, you just never know. So I just want to give you guys some hope today and some encouragement. And you are worthy. You beautiful. You are just so strong, and you're capable of anything with God. There's nothing too big for God. And so I absolutely, I never thought that I would be on a podcast sharing these thoughts. And even, this is my very first podcast I shared with you, Janet. And, I'm thankful. And it's like, I don't even, I haven't practiced the speech. What am I going to say? Because I was, like I mentioned to you, like, what part of me do you want to hear? What are we exactly talking about? And so, just given this opportunity to share a small piece of, my story, I just hope that it encourages somebody, one person out there, even, because you are worthy.
Jessica, this has been an amazing podcast. Those of you that are listening to Healing and Made Free, and you just heard Jessica's story. What God has done for Jessica, He will do it for you. He's no respecter of persons. And I know there's times when you're in an abusive relationship and the person will say, well, nobody's going to want you. You're worthless, and put you down as if you are just nobody, but you are somebody. And God,
you are,
for a reason. And I believe that you will make it out like Jessica made it out. And so those of you that are watching this, I believe that you are who God says you are. You're a child of God. God loves you so much. Jessica, you are amazing. Thank you for being on Healing and Made Free with Janet Boyings. God bless you. And I'm looking forward to this podcast being released.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing. My very first podcast was with you. So I appreciate you so much. And I just send you all the blessings. And I'm very thankful.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for listening to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boyings. Acts 10:34 says, God is no respecter of persons. God doesn't play favorites, which means what He has done for Janet, what He has done for guests on this show, He will do for you too. If you are struggling with anything, do not hesitate to reach out to Janet Boyings Ministries. They will do their best to help you any way they can. Go to the website, janetboyingsministries.com. Janet loves you, and most importantly, God loves you. Have a blessed day.